If you like what we're doing, subscribe here on YouTube. If you'd like to go deeper, see more original content, all commercial free, go to IvolveTV.com and become a subscriber. We're repurposing the purpose of media, and we want you to join us. Is our reality a quantum hologram? What if the truth about life after death lies waiting to be discovered in the basement of a haunted house? Are we connected to galactic civilizations? I lie awake at night thinking about these things. I never miss an opportunity to ask bigger questions. All right, here we are for another edition of Bigger Questions. I'm Ron James, and with me is Jan Harzan, the Executive Director of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, one of the most well-known and scientifically focused organizations around for investigating sightings worldwide. It's a pleasure to have you here, Jan.
Great, thanks, Ron. I appreciate it.
Jan, what led you to become the Executive Director of MUFON?
Well, it was actually really, there was nothing planned about it other than, in fact, when I was a kid, I had my own sighting with my brother, which was told me the reality of things is that they're very real. I mean, I saw a craft within 30 feet of myself in our backyard at 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday, hovering in the sky, making a humming noise, and it became obvious to me that these things are definitely real. Now, for me, it set me on a journey of trying to go understand how these operate, how they work, because I felt to myself, you know, if we could understand the propulsion behind this and how they work and the energy systems behind it, this could really be transformative for the planet. So I went down that path. Now, my brother, who was there and had the exact same experience, actually not really the exact same experience because he, I think, may have been abducted, but his experience was one of more of fear and going into drugs and alcohol because it really put him over the edge. It's one thing to believe that a UFO is real or that extraterrestrials exist. It's another thing to have them right here in front of you.
Sure.
You know, that you can reach out and touch them, because that turns your world upside down, and you are completely disoriented for weeks on end, literally. For me, I finally came back right side up and went down and did something good with it by going to UCLA, getting an engineering degree, joining IBM, working in sales and marketing, and getting to talk to the research guys, which is why I really went there. And then, but for my brother, it was a complete opposite. I mean, he went down a whole different path. Now, because of his experience, he became precognitive, and he could actually see future events. And that was one of the things that sent him over the edge, because one of the events that they showed him was the fact that the world would be completely, well, 3/4 of the world would be destroyed by nuclear weapons through an exchange of nuclear weapons between the United States and China. Now, whether that's going to ever happen or true or not, I don't know. I had the opportunity to talk to Joe McMoneagle at one of our symposiums back in 2011, I believe it was, about this. And his answer to me, because Joe is now married to Robert Monroe's daughter, and they run the Monroe Institute in Virginia, and he's also was the Stargate spy number 1, 001.
Wow.
So he worked in the whole thing with Hal Puthoff and the guys back in the day with the CIA, putting, well, basically making the remote viewing operational from a CIA perspective. His answer to me was, that's possible.
Sure.
And it
was possible for him to have that precognitive experience?
Not only that, but
the
I
outcome.
said, is this true? I basically asked him, was this true? And he says, it's one of the possible outcomes.
Sure.
So there's obviously multiple timelines we're on, and
yes,
depending which one we go down, that's certainly one of the scenarios that could happen. So when I listen to certain presidential candidates with the rhetoric that's going around, thinking, I'm not sure that would be the right person to put in the White House, because we might just make this nuclear war happen sooner than later. But basically, a White House, and he was actually showing images of what the Earth would look like and the trauma people would be going through this whole thing. And so, I mean that's very upsetting to you, you know, when you're watching this, because then you ask yourself the question, well, why should I go to work then if this is going to happen? Why should I do this? I mean, you almost like have a defeatist attitude, right? So
definitely keeps you out of the stock market.
Yeah, it definitely keeps you out of the stock market, that's for sure. Yeah. But anyway, that's kind of where it went down to.
So tell us a little bit about MUFON's mission and what it does.
Sure. MUFON is 46 years in age. It was founded in 1969. Our mission statement is the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. And so it's really two parts. One is the scientific study, which is a collection of data that we get from all these sightings that are happening around the world daily. And the other is for the benefit of humanity, because there's a strong feeling that if properly investigated and applied through scientific study and our engineers and our scientists, that there are huge breakthroughs that could happen from understanding this whole phenomenon and just what's happening about us.
So generally, you've got a network that spans all over the world, and there's chapters in different parts of the globe, and they're made up of loosely formed teams.
Well, actually, even more tightly formed teams. We operate in all 50 states and in 40 countries around the world. So we just added Hong Kong very recently, and some other countries, including Qatar. So we have national directors in the foreign countries. We have state directors in the local states. But they basically run their own organizations. And we give them a state director, national director's manual to give them basically the basic layout of how things should work, the policies and practices. And then most of them start out as field investigators to start with, so they get the whole training in that and then work their way up in the organization. So we're always looking for new people who are enthusiastic, who want to go out and do investigations and become part of the bigger team and help put on local meetings, basically, to educate the public.
And so, for the people that think that UFO enthusiasts and people that have an interest in the subject are the tinfoil hat crowd, MUFON is definitely not that. You guys are really serious investigators. You have very standard protocols,
right,
and you operate as any investigative agency would.
Absolutely. Now, we do have a broad range of membership in our membership. So you have everything from the very hard left-brain scientist type all the way through to, I'm sure, people who like to look at crystals and do other things. So, but I always tell people we're kind of our mix is just a little bit left of center. We're very scientific, but we're open to other possibilities. I mean, obviously this phenomenon shows characteristics that are not necessarily nuts and bolts kind of things. In fact, when I first got started in it, I was kind of looking at it from a nuts and bolts standpoint, but it appeared to me that there's a lot more going on physics-wise and how our reality gets created than this might be part of the whole phenomenon.
Now, that's an interesting segue, because the nature of reality and what we're learning through quantum physics and
right,
new scientific theories is a patchwork of information coming from a lot of different sources, but it seems to kind of come together into this realization that reality is a little bit fluid,
right,
and that we may be living in existence that is way beyond what we're able to perceive with our senses. And it's interesting to see that coming from science, coming from philosophy, coming from the study of ufology and the extraterrestrial question, yeah, and seeing it kind of fuse into a realization that we need to reshape just our general understanding, right, in order to even comprehend some of the things that we're seeing that have to be explained.
Right. Our universe is basically STEM, it's space, time, energy, and matter. And we know from Einstein's equations that we know how to convert between matter into energy. Unfortunately, we're building bombs with that. Not quite as easy to go back the other way for us. But space and time are also interchangeable. And so that's a whole other set of equations that pull everything together. So putting it all together, the universe is space, time, energy, and matter. And we're just starting to see how to manipulate that ourselves at this point in time. Yeah.
Now, the person in the field has a experience, whether it's a sighting or an abduction phenomenon case or anything along those lines, and they reach out to MUFON. What happens next?
Well, basically, when you put a report into MUFON, it is immediately sent to either the state director or national director where the sighting occurred. Their job is then to look at the case and assign it to one of their field investigators for follow-up. From that point, the field investigator will contact the witness, usually within 24 to 72 hours, depending on the type of case it is, and will make contact and then try to get additional information, from which then they try to go out and corroborate, look at other possibilities, basically come up with a hypothesis. Based on what's been described, come up with a hypothesis of what it might be, and they'll go try to disprove that hypothesis. And if everything is disproven, at that point it becomes an unknown and it goes into our research database. I mean, everything is in our research database, but I mean, that becomes more important to us because we want to look at the unknowns at the end of the day to try to figure out what's going on. And we probably get about 35% of everything reported to us comes out as an unknown.
That high. So 35% of your cases you're not able to solve within traditional explanations.
Correct. Now, I would say this. That doesn't mean that all 35% of those cases are, spaceships from Zeta Reticuli. I mean,
sure.
They could be government aircraft. They could be a lot of different types of things.
Sure.
Or even we just weren't able to identify it as an IFO, identified flying object. But what we can do is go backwards, and we take those cases and we look at those every month we have a top 10 team, we call it, that actually tears the cases apart and looks for the ones that are most unique in a couple of different ways. One is that the object did something extraordinary. Maybe it was sitting there and it shot off into space, or maybe it was flying at 1,000 miles an hour and made a right angle turn, or did something unusual, or it was so close, it was within 100 feet, that the description of it was not like anything anyone's ever seen before. So we look for those very unique, hard, factual cases, and then we look at the witness and the number of witnesses, whether there's multiple witnesses or the type of witness it was. Was it an airline pilot? Was it a law enforcement officer? Was some where there might be some very good credentials. And then the third piece is we do a thorough investigation of it. And if that investigation has been done properly and does not turn up anything that would be explainable, we then put it in what we call our top 10 case bucket. And at the end of the year, we take all those cases and hand it over to our science review team, the Science Review Board, actually, SRB, and they then pick the top 10 cases for the year, and that becomes part of our annual report.
So when you guys get a report, obviously some of this stuff can be secret government planes, they can be all kinds of things that can be explained. Do you have a fixed protocol for reaching out to different agencies and trying to get answers about what may have been occurring?
Well, I mean, we obviously not anymore. We have no better inside track than most people, but you can certainly call the airports, you can call the military bases, you can ask for the base information officers. We do that.
And so you guys do that.
Yeah.
And then when you're evaluating your witnesses, do you do that? Do your field investigators pretty much have a protocol for how to evaluate a witness? Or does that get kicked up upstairs a little bit?
It's more of an upstairs item than that. But we do take information about the witness in terms of, how old they are and their health and their eyesight and different things to kind of get a feel for. I mean, on occasion, we'll even ask them, are you doing drugs? Are you doing this, doing that? Just to make sure that everything's on the up and up. And sometimes there are psychological cases that, have to be dealt with. But for the most part, the witnesses tend to be who they say they are, and I would say that they're very credible people. I mean, it's amazing the number of people who are willing to come forward and share their extraordinary stories with us. I always appreciate it when one comes forward and says, I don't want you to tell anyone this, in other words, because I don't want to be laughed at by my neighbors or anything else.
Sure.
Because at that point that they have seen something extraordinary and they're willing to share it, but they're fearful that it might have some repercussions for themselves.
And they're hoping that you can provide them some answers that they're going to be able to just take with them.
Correct. As opposed to someone who comes forward and says, hey, I got this great story for you, put me on your TV program.
Right.
It gives you a little bit of a heebie-jeebie, why is that person really coming forward? Not that their case might not be real, but if their first inclination is, I want to be on TV, then that's probably not the case you want to highlight.
I know I don't want to drift off the conversation, but since you brought it up, I'll ask you, has the Hangar 1 TV show increased your number of reports coming in, and you've seen an increase in people that have that motivation?
Yeah, significantly so. We've seen almost a 30% increase in cases since Hangar 1 has been airing from all over the world. We're getting a lot of cases from Europe and Asia and South America where it's been aired. A lot of people joining MUFON and wanting to become part of what we're doing, and that's great. We applaud them and then welcome them to become members and participate actively. But what we found is the cases have gone from about 8,000 up to over 11,000 in a year in terms of growth. But a lot of the cases are historical in nature. So people are reporting things that have happened to them back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Which is not a bad thing, because those tend to be the better cases. If someone is remembering something that far back, they typically have very, very good information on what happened to them because it's emblazoned in their brain. But the overall number of cases per year is about level. It's about 6,500 in that range per year around the world. Okay, so you're really getting 8,000 to 11,000 cases a year reports? Yes. Well, right now we're up over 11,000. Almost 1,000 a month is what we're running currently.
Wow. So let's break that down into numbers. Yeah. So you said a certain percentage are past cases and people having memories, they just want to get it on the record. Right. What percentage approximately are those?
I would say it's about 20 to 30% right now of our historical cases. But even, so the way it breaks down, honestly, is that we get about 10% information-only cases. These are cases where people just want to say, hey, I was watching a TV show and I saw something go through the screen of, you know, Jimmy Kimmel or whatever, or something that might have a live shot behind it on a newscast. And we check those out. Sometimes it's a bird that gets caught in the lights and different things. Then we have cases where people don't give us enough information to be able to really determine what it is. And then for whatever reason, they don't respond to our emails or don't respond to our calls. So we have to put those down as insufficient data. And then about 35% of the cases can be determined to be an IFO. An IFO would be, you know, an airplane, a balloon, the planet Venus. I mean, we've got star Sirius right now is up there, very bright in the night sky, and a lot of people are starting to notice that and then think it's something different than what it really is. So once you get through the IFOs, 35%, that leaves about 32% of unknowns in the mix. And those are really the cases we're most interested in, is looking at those unknowns.
Now, obviously, the Mutual UFO Network infers that you guys are dealing with unidentified flying objects, but are you also getting calls about abductions and encounters and experiences?
Lots. Yeah, we receive between 5 and 10 experiencer questionnaires a day from people around the world. So Kathleen Marden is our director of experiencer research. So we call it the ERT. It used to be the ART for abduction research team. We've expanded to be with the experiencer research team because I think it better connotes
seems appropriate for how it's all evolving. Sure.
And they get about 5 to 10 of these forms a day filled out from people. People contact us all the time when we have, you know, their implants removed and different things like that. So we have a protocol for going through that, trying to work with them, determine what exactly is the issue that they're dealing with. I mean, is it just that they want to talk to somebody because there's nobody in their family or in their workplace that they can talk about what's going on with them? Is it that they want to go to a support group? Is it they're looking for a hypnotherapist and they want to be regressed? We try to understand what it is they want to have happen. Do they just want to give a report so it goes part of the database? There's a lot of different things, right? And then, quite frankly, there are some psychologically unbalanced people who just need help. But that's a very small fraction of what we're seeing. These are typically very credible people who are having extraordinary experiences with some other life. So,
now, are you finding common threads that haven't been traditionally published? I mean, like, you know, dating back to the Travis Walton incident, you know, I just finished that documentary about his experience, and I became very educated on the nuts and bolts of what happened to him. And it seems as though the types of beings that he encountered and the types of technology that he encountered, considering it was 40 years ago, became the root of the mythos, if you want to call it that, as it is set out now. And so you have these different types of beings, you have these different types of encounters and these different reasons and these different things that happen. Are you finding that these threads are consistent and happening more and more?
I have. I mean, that'd probably be a better question for Kathleen Marden, but most of these are the gray type or the tall gray type of extraterrestrials or aliens, whatever you want to call them, who are interacting with us. But I find a lot of it is very, very similar to what I've read in the books and through different people's research of this. So people have very common type themes going through their progression. You know, before their encounter, now after the encounter, they're precognitive. They can do things and envision things that they couldn't before that then come true for them. It's very fascinating that when you start encountering this phenomenon, the experience phenomenon of dealing with these beings, how it actually elevates you almost into a different frequency level where you're able to do things that you couldn't do prior to that.
Has there been any additional research into how genuine these extraordinary abilities are? Is there somebody taking the experiencers, putting them into a group and running some ESP tests and some other type of testing to really document what's going on?
I'm not familiar with that type of research being done, but I do know that we do have a test that Dawn Dundere worked on with another researcher and Bud Hopkins with funding from MUFON to help put it together, where basically if you think you're an experiencer, and we do get these people who say, actually I had this really strange dream last night and I'm wondering if I'm an experiencer. Well, we have them take this test, and the test will actually tell whether you're an actual experiencer or whether you're, you know, we call it the wannabe experiencer,
I'm sure that goes over well.
well, but I mean,
excuse me, sir, you're a wannabe.
No, maybe we should restate that. But I mean, because there are people who are just wondering whether they are an experience, whether am I or am I not? Because they watch so many TV shows, they probably get freaked out about the whole thing. And then a control group, which we know aren't. And we can actually separate those things on a scatter map and actually see where they fall. And it's been pretty accurate for us. So if people just reach out to us and say, I'm having these experiences, but I don't know what it is, we can do this and say, well, perhaps you need to have some other, medical attention, but it's not specifically, hypnotherapy to go find out about what happened on your experience, because we're not showing that you had an experience type thing. So that's been helpful to kind of separate things out. And then Free, which is another organization, nonprofit, run by Ray Hernandez and his group of people, are actually doing a much more in-depth study of the actual phenomenon of the experiencers to try to figure out exactly what's going on. And we're, Kathleen Martin is on their board. We work with them closely. And that's going to drive this thing very deep, I think, where we can actually determine what's going on with these, hopefully what's going on with these people and what these experiences are all about and how they come about.
It seems as though, taking it back to what we were talking about earlier, is that the answer to this really fits into our overall understanding of our reality.
Correct.
People say, well, they're extraterrestrials are coming from outer space, they're coming from another galaxy. Well, technically, if we're living in a holographic universe, where are they really coming from? My original perception of experiencers was that they fit a certain class of people that just really didn't have anything better to do. And before I really began to understand that they are largely where they're at in their lives because they have been traumatized to a point where their level of productivity may not be as great as it would be had they not been interfered with.
Yeah, there's a segment of experiencers, and John Mack talked about it. There's a segment of experiencers that are suffering heavily from post-traumatic stress syndrome, and they really need help. I mean, they really need help, therapeutic help, and things like that to help them work through their trauma. My brother would be one of those. But there's another set of experiencers who look at this as almost like enlightenment, like, oh my gosh, look,
But it seems to indicate that those people are being dealt with in a different way.
I think it's more the human reaction to the whole experience. I think it's this, when you have an experience of this nature, look at it. I mean, my brother and I had pretty much the same experience, except I went in the house to get a camera. By the time I got out, the thing was gone. But it turned out that we found out later that almost 2 hours of time had elapsed. So while I was out there for a few minutes, he was out there for 2 hours. And they apparently had taken him on board this craft and whatever they did to him. So
it's a lot different seeing the car drop somebody off than being run over by the car. So I can see where your brother, his experience was completely different than yours. And I think this is a really interesting illustration of what happens with the missing time, the witness, and the actual close encounter. That all happened within this framework of your experience.
Well, that's why I think we need to do a deeper study, and I applaud Free for doing that, because they're going to take some 3,000 experiencers and kind of separate out the stories. What it appears is that there's a whole lot of things that are interrelated here. Near-death experiences, precognitive type episodes, UFO sightings, ET encounters, I mean, all sorts of things that happen to people that seem to be all using the same, if you will, equation to happen. I mean, so it's all part of the same phenomenon, but it's experienced differently for different people. So.
Now, do you think it's all part of the same phenomenon, or it is the same?
Probably the wrong word, but
yeah, maybe it's the same factors that allow these experiences to happen.
Yeah.
So, in other words, when we figure out what's really going on with, say, an ET abduction case, then we may also figure out what's happening with a astral projection experience, or perhaps even a near-death experience, or a
what is the physics behind it? I mean, you mentioned quantum theory earlier, and it's obviously something that we haven't quite grasped yet. But once we grasp it, I think it's going to launch us into a whole nother orbit as a civilization. Yeah.
How do you feel about where that question is taking us? Are we going to come upon an explanation that that makes sense to us in an intergalactic way? Or are we going to come upon an explanation that makes sense to us that shakes the very core of how we perceive reality?
Well, I wish I knew the answer to that, Ron. I mean, that's one thing that always makes me wonder, like, if maybe the powers that be know that answer, and it's an answer that maybe wouldn't be palatable with most people. Maybe they're doing us a favor by not telling us what's really going on. But it all depends where it comes down on, and if if we're living in a truly holographic universe, for instance, just to take that as an example, where this is all basically made up, or we're all just pixels on a screen, it's a Pac-Man, if you will.
Sure.
I'm not sure how people would embrace that or not. I mean, at the end of the day, I tell people, I say, look, if they delve into this and they become scared by it, or they delve into it and they're not, basically they become scared by it. I tell them, look, this was going on eons before you ever knew anything about it, and it's been going on for eons of time. So you should just go live your life as you're living it. If you want to pretend that there's just a picket fence in the house and the thing, and you just want to do what you're doing, get back into your life and just live it, that's fine. If you want to know a little bit more about what's going on, then I would invite you to come and explore some of these things, because this is going to lead us down to the far reaches of science and where all this technology goes.
That's why I call the show Bigger Questions, because I think really that there's two of the biggest questions facing humanity, and that's the answer to life after death and the ET question.
Right.
Are we alone in the universe?
Right.
And I feel like those questions are the paradigm shifting questions. Once those are answered in a solid way that are no longer a subject of debate, it puts an onus on humanity to rethink everything about the way it conducts itself.
Right.
And there's not very many events in human evolution that can bring about that kind of change that fast. But I think getting definitive answers to those two questions is one of those things.
I can give you the answers. The answer is yes and yes. Yes,
Right.
there's life after death, and yes, there is extraterrestrials.
But we can know that in our hearts. But when science and the religious establishments and the body politic and everybody agrees, like green grass, blue skies, or gravity, so that nobody's saying, well, no, you haven't proven that yet.
Right.
Then the true power of that knowledge can be unleashed, and I think it would be nothing but positive.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's going to be move mankind forward. Right now our favorite pastime is, as Stan Friedman likes to say, is killing each other, warring nations. We need to move to a point where we're actually loving each other and taking care of each other and making this planet a better place. And I think that's ultimately where this all leads to.
A lot of people seem to think that we're under some sort of hidden control, that may be alien-based, reptilian agendas, so to speak, and that we're actually being conditioned to have this kind of reaction and to be in this place. Because I think that people are just not naturally the way they're manifesting on this planet right now. I think that if given its own free will to evolve in a place where all things are equal, humanity would be on a little different path. How do you feel about the whole idea that we're under this control that we don't really know about?
Well, I often ask myself, who really runs this place? I mean, because it seems to me that the Congress doesn't run the world, and the president doesn't certainly run the world. But then who does run the world, right? And I don't know if it's the money mafia, all the bankers from the 1700s and 1600s who've come forward, and
the Illuminati,
the banking families, the Bilderbergers, the different things we hear about. I honestly don't know. I mean, I've often wondered whether or not there was an extraterrestrial presence behind some of the stuff, directing some of it. But those are just thoughts that I've had. I don't have any evidence to point one way or the other.
Sure. But, well, there is a very detailed legend, mythos, whatever you want to say, about how, you listen to things that David Icke says that go all the way down to reptilian bloodlines and Draco masters and just all kinds of stuff. So it's just an example of how far down that rabbit hole you want to go.
Right.
And it may be all correct, and it may be delivered in a skewed manner, but I think each individual that begins to explore this topic has to make a decision, just like you said, is like, okay, how much of this can I integrate into what I'm doing, and where do I stop, and what do I do personally about it?
I often wonder if we're operating sometime in multiple realities, because you've got this, like, everything appears this way, but yet then you have data that shows you it's really this way.
Right.
And it's conflicting data. I think they call it, there's a name for it, but cognitive dissonance or something like that, but where one thing appears one way, but it's actually appearing a different way.
Jan, what I don't understand is, with all of the evidence that's out there as to the ET connection, why are people not chanting in the streets for disclosure? And why are people walking around every day not thinking about this stuff? I mean, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, we live in this absolutely wondrous, mysterious place where there's something going on that we don't know about.
Right.
And I can't think of anything I'd rather do with my energy than try to puzzle my way out of it.
Right.
But 99% of the human population they don't even think about this stuff.
I think the problem is, and I've done this with coworkers, I would take them out to lunch and say, what's the most strangest thing that's ever happened to you? And after a while, you get them to talk about it, and they'll talk about it. But then we'll talk about the fact, my being involved in this. And I always approach this very gingerly with people. I usually start with, hey, Ron, do you think it's possible there's life somewhere else in this universe? And most people will say, absolutely, there's got to be other life out there,
sure.
right? And then I'll drive around, well, do you think there's ever been life visiting this planet here, right? And then, yeah, I mean, it's possible that it happened some planet deep past, I don't know. I mean, and then I'll say, well, have you ever had any kind of experience of this nature, or yourself, or have you had any other strange experiences? And we should get down and talk about it. But the ones who aren't really rabid about it, like you and I,
sure.
in terms of, very much into this whole thing, basically what they tell me is, it doesn't affect me, so why should I care? And I always think that's an interesting comment, because to me it does affect all of us.
It affects us in the most profound way possible.
Exactly. But
do you think that apathy is being supported by control and manipulation, or are we just naturally apathetic?
I think we're naturally apathetic. I mean, I think it's just human nature. I think that people are so worried about where their next meal is going to come from, paying the rent, getting their kid through college, whatever the thing is on their plate at that moment, that they don't have time to think about this. Because if it's not directly impacting me at this moment, I mean, look at all the wars going on the planet.
Right.
Why aren't people angry about the fact that these wars are going on? It's because it doesn't affect them directly. Now all of a sudden, if your home's being bombed and you're in Syria and you're having to take your family and walk 300 miles someplace else, you're going to be concerned about it. You're going to be involved actively. You're now an active participant. So I don't really know. What I find is that the people who are asleep, if they have an experience, they wake up very quickly.
Now, do you think that there's maybe an intergalactic protocol where a race has to earn its way into that brotherhood, or do you think that we're going to get some help that we're not getting now, or do you think we've been assisted all along and that's why we're even still here?
I mean, honestly, I don't know the answer, but I do believe there's probably some kind of a protocol. I mean, if you feel that there's all these civilizations out there and they're so far, much more far advanced, hopefully they would be working together collectively for the betterment of development. And there's probably civilizations out there like ourselves who are still stage zero, according to Michio Kaku,
well, sure.
caveman to atomic age when we blow ourselves up. He says there's 3 levels of civilization: level 1, level 2, level 3. Oh, that's the good news. The bad news is we're level 0.
Right.
We haven't gotten to 1 yet. So,
yeah.
I hope there's someone helping us. I hope there's someone moving us along, because I think we need it, and I look forward to the day when we graduate to a level 1 civilization.
I think we all do, and we all hope we'll see it.
Yeah.
Jan, thank you.
Oh, welcome.
Fantastic conversation. I really want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And, it takes everybody making their contributions, and the contributions of MUFON will go down in history as solid pieces of the puzzle.
I encourage your listeners to join and help us with our quest, and if they can become actively involved, we'd love to have them.
And we've been splashing the MUFON website on here, so
okay.
People can join, right?
Yeah,
they can
absolutely.
become members.
Become a member and get the MUFON Journal and begin participating and becoming a field investigator.
Now, are there different levels of membership that require different investments of time and resources?
No, right now, no. The answer is no right now. We're looking at, as we're building this new global database, to maybe having different level, like a researcher level, like
sure.
people who want to dive in and go through all the data and see all the filing drawers, online and stuff like that. There's other people who just want to just be a member and show their card, say I'm a
sure.
member. So the progression is generally you join as become a member. It's only $35 a year, $30 if you're 65 or older. There's a $5 discount for seniors. Then you would, if you want to become actively involved, you can either just join a local chapter and start helping out there, or become a field investigator and actually start doing handling cases and helping us with the caseload, which is pretty significant right now. And then if you work your way up, you become a state section director or a state director. And then maybe even join the board. I mean, there's different levels you can go up, but it's all volunteer, and it's exciting. I mean, I've been a volunteer for almost 25 years now, and until I recently became the executive director. But it's a great organization, and I think we're going to do great things here in the very near future.
And it's doing the work the right way. That's
right.
The most important thing.
Right. Thank you for saying that.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. If you like what we're doing, subscribe here on YouTube. If you'd like to go deeper, see more original content, all commercial free, go to IvolveTV.com and become a subscriber. We're repurposing the purpose of media, and we want you to join us.